My name's host Eric, host Talking with Famous People, and I'm talking here tonight with a full room of famous people, including Callum, Eric's Offline, Justice Post Hominid, Kit Kats, Megabro, Raven, Trongeral, Ubi, and Zach. So, we're going to talk about a question that I believe it was Justice Post Hominid asked, which was about the issue of what to do when one's empathy and logic conflict. So, that's a much more challenging question than it might initially sound like, because first of all, there's an assumption that you're getting it right. So you might not get it right. You don't know. What I mean by that is you're saying, okay, I feel bad for this person, but I'm not going to do X because it's not what's logically best for them. When you, in general, are making conclusions about what's best for other people, it's risky. So your empathy is pure. It doesn't need to necessarily imply any kind of action at all. Now, certain circumstances, however, may demand that, in fact, a choice be made in some lines like that. So I think the best example would be when it's something I experience frequently enough is a desire to give constructive feedback sometimes to people who didn't ask for my feedback. So, but sometimes they do. Sometimes I feel as though they're receptive to a little feedback, and in those cases I have to be very cautious about how to phrase it and how to frame it, because it matters a great deal. I know from personal experience that people who make stuff are impacted. Their work's informed by the feedback that they get. And so I want to make sure that to the extent that I'm giving them any guidance, it's accurate, but most importantly that I'm not discouraging. Because for a lot of people, the act of making something is taking a big risk. It takes a lot of courage, and they put a lot of weight into how people respond to the stuff they put out. And I mean, certainly, I'm still like that. Even a couple thousand videos in, if I put up one and I come back later and I think it's a stinker, I'll still want to take it down. And a lot of them I do now. I take down the. So I was really upset at myself for this horrible mix of Gregory in Disguise. It's the first one, not the other one. So anyway, regardless of that, empathy requires that one be very cautious with that, and is motivated first and foremost by goodwill, I think, in that regard. So if I do feel the need to say something that I'd rather not say because I'm afraid it's going to maybe make the person feel bad, but I think if I could figure out a way to say it nicely, that kind of a thing, as does happen occasionally. I think you go with logic if it's like that. If it's a big thing and there's a dispute at all, I think you default to the other person knows best about themselves. So that's because otherwise, anybody can use this empathy versus logic card as a framing for their own bullshit, right? You could be like, well, look, I feel so bad for those drug addicts in jail. I have a lot of empathy for them, but logic means that they broke the law. That means logically they take the punishment, and that's how society works. And I'd say a number of responses to it. But so it's a bit of a risky thing. It's kind of but by default you're framing it as you're wrong because of your feelings are disagreeing with my logic, and so what should I do? Should I prioritize the logic and do what's best, or should I prioritize making the other person feel good even though it's not best for them or best for me? If it's gray about who's it best for, I would default to empathy for sure. And if it's an important issue though, and then there's the other issues, like that's in personal stuff, right? But Having to balance emotional expertise with Russell presenting a logical answer question. Well, it's something that I'm trying to get better at, in fact. And it's what I'm trying to do now. Like, not right this second, but in general, I decided I'd rather make progress than win arguments. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that, how to actually make progress. I long ago had given up making progress or something. I don't know what I had done. I just sort of, I wasn't here yet. That's all. I didn't understand things well enough. So, that's what I've come to the conclusion that I'd like to. I know I'm a creature of habit as well. I'm sure I'll get mad and yell at somebody soon enough, but I would like to focus on making progress, like having people in a conversation in which we disagree, and I might think that they are clinging to, they're denying contradictions that I successfully pointed out. Basically, is what the gist of it is. I'd still like them to leave that conversation with some progress towards a realized relationship with reality. Any thoughts on this not morality, why do I keep saying that? On this empathy versus logic thing? Raven, which do you prefer? You prefer empathy? UB, what about you?
Oh, no. I was saying hey, and I prefer logic.
Oh, you go with the logic.
I had a thought on that though.
Oh, go ahead.
I tend to have this. Yeah, I tend to have this same issue, especially with my family. But just like in the conversation, he said life's a seesaw, and I had the same issue. Usually, if my sister ever comes up with contradictions, because I think she's an INFP as far as I'm concerned, but she tends to really hold on to like everything that she talks about, and so whenever I try to stop her in her tracks and try to give her some like constructive feedback, she tends to kind of have a more lash out kind of response, and so there are certain conversations which seem more extreme than others just because certain people are more passionate about their views and others are more, detached from their own philosophies. In other words, it's like a philosophy without a philosopher, and then you have philosophers with their personal philosophies. So, it's almost like walking on eggshells. So the best way I was able to progress it, at least for myself, is I think whenever I talk with my mother, and she's talking about something she really cares about, I tend to just kind of listen. And whenever I give my feedback, it's almost like attitude. I think that's kind of how I work it, is I'm still logical, and I don't come off as cold, but it's only because I act very calm, or, my attitude seems very empathetic, even though I'm still, like, saying like a logical, constructive feedback, if you know what I mean.
Right. And then at some point during this process, do you offer a well-timed slap if they get fussy, and then they're fine? Is that how it works?
It's weird because I tend to be a little bit standoffish, so I'm like, if I irritate them, or if they tend to get too excited or accelerated from just either over talking or just getting really irritated, I tend to just go like either whatever or okay, and I stop for a second. But then I'm like, okay, I can't end the conversation like that. That's just middle ground, and like nothing happened. Even after all that irritation and anger, nothing happened. So I'll tend to just like go back to the person and go like, okay, what are you trying to tell me? And if what you were trying to tell me is right, then you need to explain to me why you think it is right. And if you think it's right, then that's fine. But there is like little loopholes that you need to work on. And usually, like I said, a lot of it, at least with me, what worked with me, people react to me in a a really good way. Uh, Whenever I tend to have a empathetic attitude, I guess. Like, I come off very calm or serene or like still water, so to speak.
Yeah, you've got a good bedside manner. Um, I think that you grew up with an INFP in the family, is what you're saying.
I've actually tried to type like all my family members so far. So I think my sister's an INFP. I think my mother is an ESFJ, and my stepfather is an ESTJ.
And
So yeah.
why do you think that your parents raised the two of you the same way?
It seems like my sister is quite the crafty, I'm a princess kind of child. So it's like she doesn't forefront this kind of treat me nicely. She kind of indirectly puts it out there and kind of is a rebellious kind of child. So she'll come off that way. And
excuse me for a second. I gotta go deal with this shit. What the hell's going on? Yeah, she watered so much. She watered all the time. Oh. You can see it's so wet. She watered like twice a day. That's why it's like that. Uh-huh.
yeah.
Okay, well, I got a couple.
No, that's good.
A couple of elderly neighbors came over to look at the neighbors' bushes, and they both.
Oh, okay.
And the
Mind if
Chinese.
I ask what they're doing exactly?
They're just out for a walk or whatever. They're
Okay.
looking at these bushes over here, which is the jungle basically. Because my neighbor lady, she waters like 2 times a day. Anyway, and so
Jumanji.
yeah, and these ladies, the Chinese one, Delilah ran into her tree with a car one time. So I mean, she lives right there. I know those people, but they're like 80
So
years
these
old.
bushes have history.
Oh, there's different bushes Delilah ran into. Regardless.
Oh, okay.
That's what that was all about. Let me stop this video since it's got all chaotic and start another one.
No, that's fine.